Hi everyone, and welcome to the NCAT webinar, The Science and Black Art of Product Pricing. My name's Lizzie Gill. I'm the Montana Local Food Specialist for the National Center for Appropriate Technology, which is kind of a mouthful, so most people just know us as NCAT. NCAT is a nationwide nonprofit organization with 6 regional offices across the country. We work on issues pertaining to sustainable agriculture, sustainable energy, and sustainable communities. Thank you to NCAT and the USDA Specialty Crop Block Grant for making this webinar a possibility. The webinar is being recorded and will be available on the NCAT's Actra webpage. Actra, a sustainable agriculture information service, is funded through a cooperative agreement with the USDA Rural Business Cooperative Service, and we're grateful for their support as well. Actra offers a wide range of services to sustainable ag producers, including publications, toll-free helplines, videos, podcasts, databases, and webinars. You can check it out for yourself after the webinar on the Actra website, www.atra.ncat.org. Don't worry if you didn't catch that address. We'll have contact information for Actra on the screen towards the end of the webinar. So today's presenter, we are lucky enough to have Gail Nickel-Kailing to share her expertise. Coming from generations of women who had special kitchen skills, a grandmother who was a great bridge club cook, a great aunt who spent 30 years in the Foreign Service with a full kitchen staff, and a mother who embraced the new time-saving canned and frozen processed foods of the 1950s, Gail didn't know her way around a kitchen very well. Her husband, raised by a health food nut mother in the 1940s, rescued Gail and taught her the joys of organic, minimally processed, home, locally grown food. Gail has worked her way through multiple careers, sometimes multiple paths at the same time, including but not limited to food marketing, food journalism, technology consulting, and professional marketing. Currently, Gail works as a consulting partner for Good Food World at home. This only begins to brush the surface of Gail's expansive expertise, but for time's sake, I'm going to leave it at that. So there's a couple of things I'd like to point out before we get started today. First, you'll see a field on the screen where you can write questions during the webinar. I'll be collecting the questions and Gail will answer a number of them towards the end of the webinar. Don't be shy about asking questions. If you ask a question and it isn't answered during the webinar, we will answer it in all the questions we get via email in the days to come. In fact, if you think of a question after the webinar or any sustainable agriculture question, look for the Ask an Ag Expert contact information on the Actra website. Finally, at the end of the webinar, you'll receive a short survey. Please take a few minutes to answer the survey. There will be space for you to show interest in further no-cost training with Gail, and it helps us make future webinars as effective and helpful as we can. So that's enough of me. Let's turn things over to Gail.
Gail, we can't hear you.
Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's start over again. So thank you, Lizzie. I really appreciate that. Next slide, please. I just wanted to let you know I'm so excited about talking about my favorite topic, food. So the purpose of our discussion today is to lay the groundwork for you to develop a strategy for pricing your products that will generate enough revenue to support your business while carving out a competitive space in the marketplace. Remember Goldilocks? Just like her, we want just right, not too little, not too much. We will talk about branding and positioning and messaging, all the fun marketing stuff as we go along. And I'm just going to touch on those. This is not a marketing seminar. We'll dive into the details of cost of ingredients, labor, packaging, overhead, and margins. And finally, we're going to roll up our sleeves and do some number crunching in the end. That's really what we're coming for today. As we said, any questions that come up, please put them in the questions. We'll answer them. So get comfortable, have a pencil handy, and get ready to work a little magic. Next slide, please. What actually affects pricing? It's a lot of stuff. So there's a lot of bubbles and things to balance as we go along. When we talk about packaging, it's the product, it's what you put your product in. And you put it in there to get it through the supply chain. But the real purpose of packaging is brand identity, communication, information, and food safety, protecting the product and the consumer. So when we take into account what our packaging costs, we are taking into account that this is what we get it through the system with. We're going to talk about retailers' position. That can affect your pricing. Just think about your local IGA store or a small family-owned supermarket, a natural food co-op, a specialty retail store, and Whole Foods and Whole Foods lookalikes. Their costs and profits can vary a lot, and those will affect what you want to and can charge for your product. Are you a specialty product or are you a commodity? A friend of mine who owned a small organic flour mill complained to me loudly one day that the stores considered his flour a specialty product, and they applied a higher margin to their specialty products, which made his flour almost twice as much per bag as the gold medals of the world. He may have been coming at that from the wrong direction, but are you competing with, quote, commodity products? Are you competing with specialty products? So we have to think about what you are. We think about shelf life affects your final price. Different departments in the store apply a different margin. And so the shelf life of your product really will affect what you finally can charge for the product. Think about day-old bread. An artisan bakery that sells fresh bread baked every day has 1 day to move that product before the value starts to go down. And then some stores will, of course, discount the product to move it out of the store. Others will discount if it doesn't move, they donate it to a food bank to remove it. You're going to be responsible for some of those costs, either in the form of a discount or a chargeback. Now remember, I'm going through this as a summary. We're going into a little bit detail as we go along. But pricing is just part of selling a product. It's the taking of the orders, it's the delivery, it's the invoicing. So we have to think of pricing in the bigger picture. Next slide, please. As we go through this, we're going to talk about some dreaded details. The Brits have got something on us here. You know, they measure in grams, actually. They use the metric system. We measure in cups and spoons, and of course they think we're crazy. Which is better? Well, let me tell you. Here's one way to find out. First of all, if you don't have a kitchen scale, get one. You can get one for $10 to $50 on Amazon. Usually figure you're going to spend about $25 or $30 for a good one, a decent one. Measure 3 cups of unbleached flour and put them in 3 identical bowls. First one, you're going to dip and scrape, which is, you know, a technical term. Second one, you're going to dip, shake it to level it, and add more flour until it's level. So you want 1 cup level at the top. The third one, you're going to dip it, go and push it down a little bit with a spoon and put some more in and level it off. Now, all of those technically are 1 cup, but when you weigh them, you will see that they're 3 different weights. So that's why we measure, we use weight as opposed to measure. Plus, if you are trying to measure with cups and spoons, there are a number of varieties of cups, and some of them aren't a cup. They're different sizes. And spoons, are you using a kitchen spoon or a tablespoon? And again, they aren't all consistent. So in my mind, weighing is better. And another reason that you want to weigh is because your ingredients will come to you in a container that is going to have ounces and grams on it. So they have already weighed it for you. Problem is, when you do that, you have to think about what you're going to get out of the container, not just what went in. I have an ongoing battle with trying to get peanut butter out of a jar, and I have no idea how much I leave in there. The best part's when you're scaling up your recipes going forward, you want to make sure that you use the grams and divide by 1,000 to get kilograms, because it's a lot easier to scale than trying to figure out the cups and spoons as you're going forward. That's one of my dreaded details. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the other dreaded detail. What is the markup and what is the margin? And I have to tell you that when we were talking about this presentation and I was putting it together, the light bulb went on. It took me years to get these concepts straight. I wish somebody had drawn this picture for me sooner. If you look at this, what is a margin and what is a markup? A markup is an amount added to your cost to get you a final price. So when you look at the left pie there, what you see is if you want a 50% markup, it's 50% of your cost. Divide the blue into half, put half of it in the orange one, and that is your markup. So a $3 cost plus a 50% markup is $4.50. When I saw that picture, I said, well, geez, I got it. Then you look at a margin. Cost times your margin gives you your final price. So you're getting at these from two different ways. You're adding a markup, you're multiplying a margin. So if you look at cost times margin to get your final price, the right-hand side is your cost, $3, whatever it is that you've got there. Your left-hand side shows that half of your final price is your margin. A markup, half of your final price, in this case, is a third. A third of your final price is your markup. On the margin, a half of your final price is margin. Markup is added to your cost. Margin is multiplied times your cost. Where you can get yourself bollocksed up here is if you are basing your pricing and your costing on markup, you can see that your profit is smaller. The orange part is smaller. So we need to just be very accurate about what you're trying to calculate. Cost times margin is calculating which part of your final price is profit. Markup is calculating how much more than your cost your price is. So that 50% markup is only 1/3 of your cost. Now, the good news is, oh, I have to tell you another bad news, my story. I have a sister-in-law who once said to me in her little shop, oh, I mark everything up 50%. I add 50 cents to every item. Okay, that one didn't quite compute. But as they say on the late night infomercials, wait, there's more. You will get a copy of a very handy markup margin chart to help you calculate yours. It's a chart that goes from 1% to 100% on one end, and it will let you calculate what your margins and markups are. I love it. I don't want to use my calculator. I'm going to look it up. Okay. Next slide, please. How many of you know someone who has decided to start making some kind of a product, particularly to sell in a farmer's market or sell direct, And the first thing they do is go to the grocery store and say, man, I can charge that much for my product. No. So let's talk about, again, part of this is the branding, positioning, and messaging that we just talked about. Price depends on a lot of soft elements. On the left, you see two different companies selling artisan bread. Selu is a company in Washington, D.C., and they sell a whole grain bread, a loaf for $11 each. Sunflower Bakery, and I have to give a little plug for a friend who just opened up her own bakery here in Helena. She sells a classic sourdough for $6 each. Why can't she charge $11? Well, first of all, the baker and the owner of Selu has become a celebrity. He's been written up in everything from the New York Times to Edible DC. He bakes only whole grain bread, and he mills his flour every day before he bakes. He lives in Washington, D.C., which is a high-cost, high-income area, and so he can get it. So that's when you have to compare a lot of those soft things as to what you can charge. On the right, you see two different kinds of, well, one's a jelly and one's a preserve. One is 13 ounces. The Stonewall Kitchen red pepper jelly is 13 ounces for $8.99. The blueberry, Eat This blueberry cardamom preserves are $9.99 for 7 ounces, almost half for $1 more. Well, why is it that the blueberry cardamom preserves is worth more? At least that's what the price tells us. One is their ingredients, high quality ingredients. Jelly is made from strained fruit juice, jam is made with mashed fruit, and preserves are made with whole fruit or large pieces of fruit. This one has a unique container, and they also have very unique flavors. So when you start looking at why do I have to price my product a certain way? That's what we talk about when we talk about the branding, the positioning, and the messaging. You will ultimately be telling your consumer through a lot of different ways that you're worth every penny. So next slide, please. So we'll back up just a tad. Who are you? Who do you want to be? That also shows, it sets the price for you. Who's your competition? Your competition is anything that your customer can substitute for your product. What does your competition charge? Why not just price match? It's easy to charge what the other guy charges, but it's likely to be not your price. Do they have the same cost, the same distribution channel, the same target customer base, the same retailers? How about cost plus or value-based pricing? For someone who's doing a very special product, and I'm assuming that we have a lot of people who are either producing or considering specialty products, what you're looking for is what makes yours different. Why should they spend more for yours? So it takes a little thought to get there. Next slide, please. Okay, a few more pricing thoughts. Cost plus pricing, which is from the bottom up, assumes that you sell all your units, and so you will need to look at, quote, your break-even point and see how many you have to sell. And that break-even point is basically what it costs you to stay in business, plus the amount that you need to make a profit. And remember, that profit is used to grow your business, to buy new equipment, to do some research and development, and then divide it by the target price per unit to see how many units you need to sell. So you just need to come up with how much do I need to sell? That's the break-even point. Value-based pricing means that your price is based on what your customer is willing to pay to get your product. And again, that's why we have to position that product as worth every penny. Watch your costs like an eagle. And the reason I say that is you change suppliers or your supplier increases a cost and you don't calculate that in. You ignore those small increases until it's too late and your profit is dribbling away. Watch the market price and see who is there. Are there new entrants to the market? Has your competitor raised or lowered a price? Prices fluctuate, and keep in mind the promotional pricing in the mix, because you're not going to want to price your product at full price against someone else's promotional price. Finally, when we talk about the value of your product to the customer, understand your target customer as much as you can. And man, social media is perfect for this. It's a way that you begin to communicate directly with the consumer, because the consumer relationship is the one that drives the whole supply chain. If there's no consumer out there buying your product, there's no point in making it and distributing it. So the whole idea is develop those close personal relationships with your consumer. Okay, next slide, please. All right, don't panic. This is a spreadsheet. It's okay. Part of our total pricing tool includes several sections, and originally we sent out the pricing tool with these sections highlighted, asking that you think about this stuff before we start this session. There are really three key ingredients that are going into your cost per unit. Now we approach the science part of pricing. It also will help you discover more about your own business with this exercise. It helps you itemize all of your ingredients or all of your label and packaging details or the production process. If you look down through this whole thing, it tries to walk through the production process. Your process will look different, but the idea is that you're going to list every one of your production functions here. If you have any questions, now is a good time to put them in the question list, because we will be digging deeper into this and there will be time to ask those at the end. Weight unit, you notice here I have ounces. You can put ounces or you can put grams. I prefer grams, some people prefer ounces. That's how much your ingredients are going to be calculated based on the weight of the ingredients, or if it's a liquid, on the liquid weight. I mean the liquid measure, milliliters. For those of you who did this, I'm hoping that you had a scale. I'm hoping that it was easy to find and calculate your freight costs, but we do want to tell you you're not alone on this one, and I am here to help. Next slide. So now we're going to just isolate these little boxes. And I'm going to tell you, I noticed here, I have a new numbering system. So it's 1, 2A, 2B, and 3. So, sorry, too many twos. When you got your form, the idea was to complete the red box. Each ingredient is itemized, so you know exactly what each one costs, each and every ingredient, including that pinch of salt. It can be helpful to list them in order of that you will have them on your label. And this is a little strange time to be thinking about the label, but when you have ingredients listed on the label, you list them by weight. And so putting the ingredients in that order will just kind of simplify things for you. The container that the ingredients come in will have a label on it that says how many ounces and how many grams are in it. Be aware that the number measures what was put in the container, not what you get out of it. Me and my dreaded peanut butter. So what you're going to need to do is measure what you actually get out of the container. No problem if you're dealing with, a granulated spice, a real mess if you're dealing with molasses. The total cost, so you have ingredient cost and you have freight cost to add together to get to the total cost. The freight cost is the weight, is the amount you have paid to get your products delivered. This one can get kind of tricky if you have multiple products in the same delivery, because you will have to calculate out which freight cost applied to which ingredient cost. Think about that as weigh each container and calculate the percentage of weight that container takes, and then take that percentage of your freight cost. In other words, what you're going to want to do is divvy up your freight cost proportionally to the weight of your ingredients. So if you have a 10-pound bag of salt and a 1-pound bag of sugar, your 10-pound is 10 times the weight of the 1 pound. And so you'll divvy up your freight cost that way. Now, the next thing you do is you're going to calculate how many units are in each one of those containers. And as I said, they come with ounces or pounds and kilos, or ounces and grams. So you'll need to know how many ingredients are in that container, how many units, in order to calculate your per unit cost. So I'm working across the top line. I have my ingredient cost. I've added the freight cost to get the total cost. I have calculated the total number of units in those containers based on what's really on the outside. You will need to adjust that, but that's going to give you in general. And then calculate the per unit cost by dividing the total cost by the number of units. Now, here's where the rubber meets the road. Let's assume that we have a batch of 1,000, whatever it is we're producing, and it takes 5,680 ounces of ingredient 1 and 2,000 ounces of ingredient 2, and on down the line. So what you're doing there is you're actually calculating the cost per batch of that ingredient. The reason we need to do that is we add up the entire batch cost, in this case, $1,902.48. Divide that by 1,000, and now you know per container, per unit, what your final ingredients cost are for your product you're making. It's important that we base this on per unit, per container, in order to get our final pricing. So next slide, please. Packaging cost is done somewhat the same way, although packages are kind of iffy. But let's go back and look at what goes into your package. I'm going to assume that it's a kind of a jam or jelly or spread or something. So we have a container, we have a lid, we have a front label and back label, or if you do a wraparound label, you just have one. If you have a safety seal that you put inside, or if you have a label that you put on top that goes down the side to act as a safety seal, then you will have to add all of those in. The next step is you will be packing these things in a carton because you're going to, or in a case, because you're going to sell a case at a time. So a case, we know what the case is, we know what the carton is. Now the case and carton can be two different things. In the larger world, when you have, a larger company with lots and lots of production, you will put cases on a pallet to ship. A smaller company, you might ship cases in a shipping carton by a UPS or USPS or common carrier. So you look at how you're going to get your product through the supply chain, all of the stuff, containers, lids, labels, cases, cartons. Now, here's where your pricing is different than your ingredients. You've got your packaging cost, the item, each item. So if I bought, 1,000 containers, how much did those 1,000 containers cost me? That's your packaging cost. How much did it cost to ship them to me? That's my freight cost. So I have my total cost. And in this case, I know that I ordered 1,000 containers, so that's 1,000 units. In the green box, we start with the per unit cost, same as before. We divide the total cost by the total units to get the per unit cost. And then we multiply back again by 1,000 to get the batch cost. What you want again is you want the cost of the packaging and the amount of the case and carton price that you are attaching to that unit to get a per product unit cost. Now, let's go back to this one just again. If your case holds 12, you will be dividing the cost by 12 in order to get the unit cost per individual container. So 1/12 of that case is applied to the total units. That's where the total units goes, is if you have multiple products and you're putting them in a case, you're going to put 1/12 is going to be the unit for an individual product. If your carton holds 4 cases, and there's 12 in each case, that's 48 units. So you will divide the carton price by the number of cases and the number of units in that carton. So what we're basically doing is we're trying to apply the proportional cost to each unit so we can calculate the cost per product unit. Next slide, please. This one's shorter, thank you. List everything that you do to make your product. And then you will try to group them by process, because you're not going to, in some cases, cook a product and then wait. Fill a jar and then wait. You may cook a group of products in a batch and then begin to package them, or you may do it in parallel. But the idea is to try to put your production in manageable chunks so that you can apply an hourly rate or a batch price to that. In this case, I'm assuming, for simplicity's sake, that I have one set of people doing my production, I have one set of people doing the fill and seal and label, probably the same people who are packing the cases and packing the shipping cartons, or at least packing the cases. So calculate your hourly rate. If you want to add your benefit cost so that you have your fully loaded hourly rate, you can do that and use your, that's total cost. Total units means how much did I produce for that amount. If it took me X number of dollars to produce a batch of 1,000, that's what I would have units in the batch to the right. That's how many total units would come out. If I do my smaller batches, if I produce 250 at a time, I would put 250 as the total units. But the idea is to create my per unit cost, multiply that back against the units in the total batch, and divide to get the individual product container price cost. So complete the red box. It's simpler, thank God. Okay. Now, next slide. This one is the one that gives everybody the shakes, because this is where we actually get to a price. And if you look at this, you will see that I need to know what that total per container unit price is in order to get to the result I want. When we talk about channel pricing, that means how the product is priced through the supply chain or supply channel, or how the distribution channel. In this example, my channel includes a distributor. That distributor, if you understand how the distribution relationships work, a distributor buys products from lots of different suppliers and sells products to lots of different customers. They warehouse those products, they gather up a particular customer's order and either deliver or ship it to them. They're basically your sales channel. They're your salespeople. A cottage industry producer isn't going to have a distributor. A small business that's delivering directly to stores isn't going to have a distributor. But I'm going to tell you why you need a distributor. At least you need the distributor in this calculation. Let's put it that way. Your particular business may not need a distributor, but you need to calculate the distributor's margin in your pricing because for two reasons. One, you are the distributor, frankly. You're the one who's getting it to the customer. If you're doing farmers markets, you have overhead costs for the farmers market that could be applied as if you were a distributor. If you are trucking your jams and jellies in the trunk of your car from store to store to store, trust me, you are a distributor. So with these channel margins, I have included a distributor margin because as you grow, someday, if you don't have a distributor now, you will want one. And frankly, changing price by raising it because you've increased your costs and you've increased the steps in the supply chain are going to cause your end customer to take a second look. So we don't want to be raising our price too high. Here's what you do. You get out your handy dandy margin markup chart. And when you look at that, you are going to set a wholesale margin on your product. That wholesale margin is what pays you. That's your extra profit to pay for growing your business, for new equipment as you expand your sales. So 38% margin. Remember the picture where the margin was the profit on top of the cost of goods. 38% margin is calculated by a multiplier of 1.60. Now, I've just spoken foreign language to everyone. What that means is to get your wholesale margin, you will take your per unit cost that we calculated above in those three sections and multiply it times 1.61, and voila, you have now added your 38% margin. Margins, I've just used these as examples. Margins have to be calculated as a real world number, but these are basic numbers that are going to resemble the real world. In some cases, they are slightly different, but this is what I've used here. Now, this distributor margin that we just talked about, you are going to do that. You're going to add it again. So down here below, where we see the tool below calculates what the retail cost would be based on channel margins and your wholesale margin. The first line, your wholesale price, what we just did was we took your per unit price, we multiplied it times 1.61, and the number that appears there is your wholesale price. That's what you charge your distributor. Don't have one? Fine. Your distributor margin is the next thing that you calculate. In that case, I hate to tell you, margins are cumulative. So the wholesale price is what you charge the distributor. Your distributor takes that price, line number 2, multiplies it times 1.39, the second number in the upper right-hand corner under multiplier, to get his or her 28% margin. Now, in this case, distributor margins, first of all, depend very much on the distributor, but there appears to be sort of a general number that is about 25%. I made this one 28 because your distributor is selling a product based on what is called landed price. So his product is the cost he pays you plus the freight to get it to him. So that's his landed cost. So under price analysis, wholesale price, you just calculated that by multiplying your cost of goods by 1.61. Next line, you are going to calculate the distributor price by taking the wholesale price immediately above it, multiplying that by 1.39, the second multiplier on the upper right, to get the price the distributor has to charge. The third line here, retail price, is calculating what the shelf price would be on sort of a standard, full line grocery store or a food co-op, something like that. These are easy now. What I've done is I take this, the retail price, I take the distributor price above it, multiply it times 1.67, the third multiplier on the upper right-hand corner, to get a retail margin of 40%. That's the price that your product is going to sell on the shelf by these calculations. We have a little bonus one, which is the Whole Foods retail price. Whole Foods has a slightly higher margin for specialty products, about 42%. So you will calculate that instead of the retail price above if you are targeting Whole Foods as a retailer. Okay, so now we've figured out what your wholesale price is going to generate as a retail price on the shelf. That's in a perfect world. And I say perfect because this needs to be reasonably competitive and to be a price that you can justify by your product's value. So I'm going to insert a little comment here which says, take a breath, because chances are that price is a little bit more than you thought it was going to come out to be. So let's try this from a different direction. Let's go down to calculating based on what is my budget for my product to get that shelf price that I want. So we're going at it from the opposite direction. At the top line, under target price analysis through the distributor, remember I have the distributor in there, you put down what you want your target retail price to be. Okay, I want my jam to sell for $6.99. Your target distributor price, here's how you get that. You take that $6.99 price and what we call the multiplier before, you're going to divide. So you're going to go up here on the upper right-hand corner to the 1.39 number under the multiplier. That's your distributor margin. And you're going to divide the retail price by that. In other words, you're taking out the distributor's margin. So you take that out. So now I'm down to $4.19. Then I go back to this multiplier, only I'm now calling it a divider. I take the distributor price, I divide it by the distributor price margin, and I come out with my wholesale price. I'm going to walk through this one more time when I'm done. And the target product cost, in other words, my budget for making this product per unit, I take my wholesale price, $3.01. I divide by 1.61, my wholesale margin, and I get $1.87, which means I have $1.87 to spend to make each one of my units. So let's go back through this again, because I want to make sure I was clear on it, and I think I may not have been real clear. Target retail price, $6.99. Divide it by 1.67, your general retailer margin, and that gives you $4.19. Divide $4.19 by 1.39, your distributor multiplier, your distributor margin of 28%, and that gives you a wholesale price of $3.01. Divide that by your margin, your wholesale multiplier, 1.61, and that gives you a budget of $1.87 per product. That's a scary number because if I want to find out the ratio of my product cost to my retail, I'll divide them. And what I found out is that a $1 glass jar, because I love that glass jar, adds $3.75 to the end price of my product. So what that's going to tell me is I need to find a less expensive bottle or jar, or I might need to raise the price. So that's what we're doing here. Okay, now, Lizzie, I'm going to turn this one over to you.
All right, thanks, Gail. We're going to pause for a second to take a quick poll that Marianne's going to put on the screen here for you guys. Gail has generously offered to do smaller group follow-up sessions at no cost with attendees of this webinar. So if you want to just respond yes or no to the following poll, if you're interested in a more personalized product pricing session. I do want to emphasize this poll is to gauge interest. So if you select yes, you still have to take the webinar survey afterwards so we can contact you directly. But we appreciate you taking this poll. And don't forget to put your questions in the window pane. We already have a lot. So I'll give you guys a second to answer this. All right, I think we've given you guys enough time there. So thank you for your input. And Gail has just a little bit more. Thank you for all of your participation. And then we'll get to some questions in a bit.
Next slide, please. Okay, we're not going to go into any detail on this one because I want to take your questions. But the idea is that there is a whole lot more than just product price to selling a product. We look at your shelf life and your final price. We look at promotional discounts, promotional calendars, taking orders, delivering an inventory. All of this is wrapped around getting that product to the customer. As I said, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because I'm much more interested in your questions. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the Actra Publications link that Lizzie was talking about for the Ask an Ag person. And this is my website if you want to have some fun. Next slide, please. Okay. Well, we're under the illusion that communication has taken place, but we'd like you to ask us some questions so we can make sure.
Well, thank you, Gail. That was extremely informative. We do have a lot of questions. I don't think we'll be able to get to all of them, so I'm just going to ask some of them, and the rest of them we will answer via email. But to start, I did want to say the slides and this recording will be accessible to you guys after the webinar, and with links to both of the worksheets. So you'll have access to that. First question I have for you, Gail, is We have someone wondering, how do overhead costs like rent, utilities, and insurance get calculated into product pricing?
Well, we're working from the cost of goods to calculate the pricing, and that's why we build into that our wholesale margin. So out of the wholesale margin is where your other revenue chunk comes, because you have to have a price that's going to cover the cost of your goods, the boxes to get it delivered, you know, the labor. That's all calculated in what's called cost of goods. So that's why when you build your margin for your wholesale price, you are taking into consideration those additional expenses. Now, it's a little hard to pinpoint that, because what I'm saying is you need to know, when we talked about our baseline sales, you need to know how much your break even, how much you have to sell in order to pay those expenses out of that margin. That's why you start with your budget for running your business, to calculate how much revenue you need to bring in to pay those expenses, to pay your employees, to pay your rent. That's your that's the number that you are going to apply, the number of units you have to sell to break even. Say you have to make X number of dollars a day to keep your business open, and you have to sell X number of loaves of bread to do that. It's that margin, that percent over the cost, the final cost of goods, that gives you the money to keep your business open. So they're not calculated in the cost of goods. It's revenue, expenses, gross profit. So revenue is, in this case, what it costs to sell, what you sell these products for. Then the expenses to make those products, and then your gross profit is the dollars left from that. That's the money you have to spend on the business. And I mean, that's a very shorthand way of looking at it, but that is in the simplest form, that's where it comes from.
Okay, great, thank you. We have someone here that is working with harvesting wild edibles. Thus, it's very difficult to find market prices. Do you have any recommendations in other pricing help for super specialty items, finding those pricings?
Well, first of all, I'm assuming that wild edibles is going to be things like mushrooms or herbs. So maybe whoever asked that question wants to quickly say yes or no. But if you're pricing a wild edible, in most cases, and now this is my assumption, I may be completely all wet, but I would think there would be some model that you could compare to if you're going to be harvesting mushrooms or fungi or things like that. There are, in general, prices in the store for domesticated, harvested, commercially grown products. The same thing with if you're harvesting herbs or.
And Gail, I will interrupt you. We did get a response. It's for herbs and greens.
Okay. Yeah. So for the herbs and greens, I realize that you may be pricing something that is not in the store at this point. But what I would use as a baseline is, what are the fresh herbs selling for in the stores now? And what's gotten really bizarre is now it's not just fresh herbs, but it's herbs with roots that are still growing. So, you've got all kinds of bizarre things to compare it to. The thing that you want to keep into consideration is looking at those prices. You're, I'm assuming, going to have a product that nobody else has, or that very few people have. So you have a product that you are going to be able to price on value, not on cost. I would imagine that you can add a slight add a premium. If you think about it, if it's $6.95 for a bundle of fresh basil or whatever it is, you know, add a premium to that, 25 or 30%. See what you come up with. So what you're going to start thinking about is, why is my product so special? Well, frankly, it's because I'm an expert in this. I know how to pick the very best products. I spend my days out there communing with nature. I'm trying to write your marketing right now. But, you know, coming up with this is grown at 7,000 feet in the mountains, whatever. You know, you've got to add all the good stuff. Then you also need to be thinking about why this particular spice. You want to talk about, or herbs, greens, whatever. Why would you want this one? Well, watercress from that spring at the top of the mountain, which I've had the water tested so I know it's pure, is worth it. You know, it's got a special flavor. It's so fresh and crisp that you just can't get that. So you see, what we're looking at there is, you just want to start with a ballpark, and then we want to sort of figure out how much more what you do and what you have adds to that. That's the premium that a specialty product can charge.
Great. I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll just email answers to the rest of these. But what spreadsheet program do you recommend that is simple, concise, and has ease of use, considering we are mostly all out on the farm and ranch and time is of essence?
Oh, well, I guess my question is, what are we using it for? Is this measuring labor cost? That was my question there. I use Excel for everything, and I have it on my iPad, and I take it with me. I take my iPad with me everywhere. So there probably are out there programs that will calculate some of these for you, but I'm not sure where the on the farm part of this is being priced. The only thing I can think of is maybe labor. So I'm kind of leaning towards Excel. Email me with that question, because I really think we need to, I need to talk to this person and find out what they're actually trying to do.
Great. Thank you, Gail. I think that's all we have time for today, but we will follow up with any other outstanding questions via email. Before we end the webinar today, I did want to put in a little plug, next slide, Jason, for Montana Harvest of the Month producer portal. So the Montana Harvest of the Month program showcases Montana grown foods in Montana communities. It's open to K through 12 schools, after school programs, summer food service programs, early care and education facilities, business, community, and healthcare institutions. The two primary goals for this program are to expose children and adults to new healthy Montana foods and support Montana's farmers and ranchers. Therefore, a new producer Harvest of the Month portal is being created to connect producers with Harvest of the Month registrants, other producers, and resources like today's webinar and one consolidated platform. So if you're interested in learning more, make sure to take that follow-up survey. That is all we have time for today. So thank you for taking part in the webinar, The Science and Black Art of Product Pricing. Don't forget to check out the other webinars and all other information available at NCAT Actra website. Two final big reminders. First, be on the lookout for a follow-up email that will give you all access to this recording and a PDF explaining the markups and margins, which is extremely helpful. Second, please remember to take the survey you'll receive as soon as this webinar is over. This survey will gather those of you that are interested in further training with Gail and who have more interest in Montana Harvest of the Month. So we appreciate all of your input. Thank you, Gail, and thank you to all for tuning in.